Good morning and welcome to the March 9th, 2015 executive session. First item, SOC calendar continued hearings, calendar number 25-57-BZ, 221-18 Merrick Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, in terms of submissions, they provided 1961 images that show that non-conforming kind of pylon sign was in place then. They provided a satellite image showing that backing up against the warehouse building on this site are one-story residential garages, so it's impossible to get behind there, and therefore the rear isn't actually visible. But in fact, they didn't address the main threshold issue that we've been asking them to consider, which has to do with the size of the zoning lot, which could not have increased since the original variance grant. I note in doing my own research that there's a 2006 deed that includes lot 26 and 37, and another 2006 deed that includes lot 26 and 22, so that makes them all in the same ownership. I note also that there's the same architect for this lot as on lot 22, and they filed for a DOB denial to construct a one-story structure to go to the BSA. Maybe they misfiled it on that lot number or something like that. So, but though though it's held in common ownership, the tax lots have not been merged, and the question is, does this meet the C definition for the definition of zoning lot? And the applicant really has to address that. The plans, for example, show the building on lot 37 opening onto the lot 26 parking lot, which is why we keep asking, isn't that the parking that's going to be used in association with lot 37? They did provide a 1971 C of O for lot 37, which shows it as a warehouse, but that's from 1971. My understanding is it's going to be used as part of the flea market, which therefore implies that this is just going to be a big conglomerate that's sharing the lot 26 parking lot. And then there's apparently a structure that's going to be built on lot 22. What is that? So anyway, so the statement of facts really needs to be revised to discuss these issues, and we need to resolve the zoning lot issue before we go forward. Any other comments on this?
Just that there was signage on lot 37 for the Merrick Flea Market. So it could be part of the same retail use, which was one of the questions I had in the beginning.
Okay.
Item number 2, calendar number 76-12-BZ, 148 Norfolk Street, Brooklyn.
Sorry, okay. So in this one, the plans were revised to move the attic portion back 26 feet from the front, which reduces the apparent mass of the building with respect to the streetscape and is much more in line with what the neighboring building did. Though that addition is still high compared to other neighbors, this house had to be lifted almost 8 feet to the top of the finished first floor, and setting the attic floor back this way significantly reduces its impact on the neighborhood. And the axonometric, though still not reflecting still reflecting extremely challenged drafting skills, does now look like the project. But the applicant still didn't address the question about the total demolition of the building and how that is an enlargement under 73-622. The statement of facts needs to be amended to address this. I think there's a simple explanation like we've seen on some of the other applications, but it's not anywhere in the materials, and it needs to be. The lawyer may want to bring the architect to the hearing to just expedite the answer, or submit something quickly. Any other comments?
Well, I like that they brought the attic back from the front of the building, but I still question if they're there's a little more wiggle room to bring the height down just a tad. It appears that they've got a good 6 feet between the underside of their rafter and the apex of the roof. So wondering if they flattened out that steep roof just a bit, they might be able to at least bring up the apparent height down a little bit, maybe by a foot or foot and a half. It just seemed to me that they have an 8-foot ceiling height in the attic, that now they have an additional 6 feet or so between the underside of the rafter and the actual apex. That could be just maybe flattened out a bit.
Okay, so then, really a good idea to bring the architect tomorrow so that we could discuss that directly.
Just understand why it needs to be at such a sharp angle.
Right. Anybody else?
No?
Appeals calendar, new cases, item number 3, calendar number 174-04-BZ, 254 West 24th Street, Manhattan.
This one was postponed by the applicant.
Item number 4, calendar number 131-11-A through 133-11-A, and 159-14-A through 161-14-A. It's 464 and 468 Arthur Kill Road, 120 Pemberton Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, this one, there's this still ongoing issue about this cul-de-sac. There's a February 13th letter from the fire department, which states that it has no objection to development on lots 35 and 37, but does object to the lot 36 development, and that the applicant the applicant states that it's in contact with the fire department regarding sufficiency of sprinklers and the frontage space that exists on lot 36, to see if that addresses the fire department's concerns, and we're waiting for a fire department response. The DOT letter from November of last year, of 2014, objects to the absence of the cul-de-sac and still does. The 2004 BSA approval of a different site plan determined that providing this kind of a turnaround would unduly constrain the site, and the applicant provided both to us and to DOT a plan showing the AASHTO standard cul-de-sac that effectively eliminates that house on lot 36. But that's the applicant's statement that we can't do it. But I actually think that's kind of a disingenuous statement, because in the DOT 1114 letter, they acknowledge that it can't be an ASHTO compliant cul-de-sac, but they did ask instead for some form of an unobstructed space for vehicles to turn around, and the applicant hasn't responded to what I think is a reasonable request. Otherwise, or the applicant should have shown that even a reasonable amount of turnaround that maybe allows a multiple point turn or something like that wouldn't work. So I'm questioning, has there been a change in condition or something that would prevent the applicant from responding to this? The applicant also, the applicant has requested that the August 2014 request from the DEP for an amended drainage plan should be a condition to the certificate of occupancy. I'm not understanding why it can't be a condition to permit approval, because when you do drainage plans, you're doing that as part of your site planning. So you can't be doing it after the fact. The house will be improperly sited or improperly lifted in terms of terrain development. In addition, the fact that they want to put this off confuses me. They've had this information since since August, and they haven't done anything about it. So I just find that strange. And I think those are my comments. Anybody else?
I would just like them to tell us what is the length of the dead-end street, because I didn't really see that anywhere. If it's over 150 feet, or what is it?
Yeah, the fire department states their rules, but
They don't really say either.
they don't say, yeah, exactly. what the length of the street is.
Okay.
And also, I think in the last hearing, I had asked that they consider putting up some sort of signage on the street that said no parking or something that kept cars from parking close to their site. Otherwise, they won't have that 30-foot frontage.
Right.
Or people will get their cars hit when big trucks come in.
Right, we see that everybody's parked up against that,
They're right up
that
against
wall,
there.
right, yeah. Okay.
We've seen in another case where DOT has accepted a plan for, not a cul-de-sac, but an alternate plan for turning, whereupon the cars could actually go onto one of the properties for a portion to do a turnaround. And I was wondering if the applicant has pursued conversations with DOT as to some sort of acceptable alternative, which would involve cars actually being able to enter the site to complete some sort of a U-turn, and whether or not they could come to an agreement with DOT where that would be acceptable.
Okay, great.
Item number 5, calendar number 95-14-A, 237 East 72nd Street, Manhattan.
Okay, we were asked to adjourn this.
Item number 6, calendar number 163 through 165-14-A, 502, 504, 506 Canal Street, Manhattan.
Okay. So the applicant revised the statement of facts to state that the first floors were vacant for decades, but they don't substantiate that. They need to provide proof. Elsewhere in the statement of facts, it states that there are 3 commercial tenants. So that seems to be in conflict. But I note that in just looking on Google searches, there were a lot of articles in particular about one of the buildings. I think it was 502, and that the entire building has been neglected for years and on the verge of collapse. But neglect can't be the reason for it being unrentable. I mean, that's what they're saying is it's an unrentable, and that's why they need this waiver, right? And I note also that Douglas Elliman is already showing photos of this as an entirely completed project with high-end finishes. So the applicant went ahead and did all this work without knowing that they could get this waiver. They also requested a conditional, if we were to approve this, a conditional approval with a term of 10 years, following with first a 6 months, after 6 months, a submission of materials, and after 5 years, a similar submission. My feeling about this is that this is an extremely risky question. There was probably 11 feet of water in this building that undermined it. That's actually one of the reasons was in such bad shape. So my feeling is that it should be a 3-year interval where perhaps in the 3 years we'll see a major storm, and we can that way verify performance of the tenant protection plan. They did provide a copy of the proposed lease rider, but I think it's extremely weak. The whole idea is to really, really notify tenants about what their risks are. So it needs to add something to the equivalent of that the tenant acknowledges because the base flood elevation is higher than the first floor than the premises. The tenant understands that despite the use of floodgates, storm waters may rise up to and exceed a height of 2 feet above the finished floor of the first floor, and in that event will damage personal possessions located at that level. It should add that in the event that water levels rise to such levels, walls, floors, electrical wiring, and kitchen cabinets and equipment will be damaged and will be replaced by landlord to match or exceed current quality levels. They should attach a copy of the FEMA flood map to the rider so that the tenant is informed and not have to go searching themselves on the FEMA website, which was what the rider says currently. They should provide the tenants with a FEMA contact information in the rider, and the rider should advise the tenant that it should obtain tenant's renter's insurance with provision for storm surge damage. I note that the rider states that the landlord will have flood insurance to cover up to $25,000 of tenant's contents, but I'm curious, and I would like them to research this. Will flood insurance actually cover damage that's below the base flood elevation if the project was specifically designed to be lower than that without obtaining waivers from FEMA specifically? And ditto, can the tenant's own renter's insurance cover storm surges under that situation? Not convinced. The rider and the emergency action plan have to be amended to state what is provided on the emergency flood procedures document. That has to form part of the lease, and the tenants have to initial it. The tenant should understand the height of the gates relative to their window sills, and also the heights of the door and window barrier shields. Neither the emergency action plan or the, what's the EFP, whatever the EFP is, I forget, discusses the door and window barrier shields. It must do that. They must require emergency contact for the tenant and a right of entry to the unit to install the shields in case the tenant isn't home. Any other?
I agree. I thought that the rider was relatively weak. As a matter of fact, I sort of took exception to, in the second paragraph where they describe what the 100-year flood is, and that it's 1%. You have a 1% chance of this ever happening, and I think that that's pushing it just a tad, because it sort of leaves the prospective tenant thinking, well, this may not be such a bad thing. It's, it's sort of pro forma. I'll just sign it without really reading it. The emergency action plan should be made part of the lease, not just furnished to the tenant,
Right.
because that should become part of the legal document. Also, the CO should mention that there is a specific rider to leases that has the emergency action plan.
The what should say? What?
The CO.
The CO, yes,
Yeah.
oh, that's good. Yeah, okay.
And indeed, there isn't really a document that explains to the tenant what the responsibilities of the owner is, like that they're supposed to have these materials stored in a particular place, so that everybody knows what everybody is supposed to be doing. And probably even for the owner's protection, the rider should make clear that if the tenants are expected to install the shutters, then the tenant has to be probably physically able to do so, just to cover, everybody's respective you-know-whats on that one. Let's see, I think that just about covered it for me.
My concern was that they're referencing the 2008 building code, and I think they should be referencing, I don't know why they are not referencing the 2014 updated building code with the updated Appendix G, which, with the change of use to residential on the first floor, the design flood elevation would actually be 2 feet above the base flood elevation, and
Right.
they're actually calling the base flood elevation the design flood elevation.
Right.
So maybe, I think this is a pre-firm renovation, which is possibly not considered substantial, but how do they feel that, under what grounds are they saying that they come under the 2008 code? Because that's not clear to me. And it wasn't clear how they don't show on the plans how they're going to connect the aquafence to the building. The closure, they have a closure piece, but in the past they were talking about sandbags or something. That's not specified on the plans. It's about a 1 foot 7 inches distance between the aquafence and the building. And there are regulations, ASCE 24, there's a certain section that gives specifications for temporary flood shields, and I wanted to make sure that they met those requirements. And after looking at the plans, I was wondering if they're going to wet flood proof the crawl space.
They said they would, so, or that
Okay, I
they
didn't
even
see any
did, so we didn't
indications
see
of
it,
that.
right.
And it's funny that they have a sump pump and a backup sump pump, but in reading, they have backflow preventer valve on the sewer pipe, so once the sewer pipe gets shut off, those pumps are
Right.
ineffective.
The purpose of the sumps were really for just general groundwater, not for gigantic flood. They'd never work for that.
Well, they have no,
Yeah.
they're actually connecting their pumps to the sewer discharge.
Oh.
So once you have a flood, the sewer's shut off.
So you're going to get backed up sewage.
Right, so
So
the
they need it
pumps are
back.
ineffective.
Yeah.
So how would they get the pumps working? Would they have to wait for all the water to,
Seed.
yeah.
So there needs to be some other, is there another solution for that?
They could have an alternate, outflow, which would possibly, put some discharge along the curb or on the street, just in case they get a lot of water in the crawl space under the building. They've thought of something like that.
Right, okay. Good. Any other comments?
Yeah, could they clarify for me the temporary channel-free flood barrier shields? Because on some of the drawings, you see it across both the windows and the doors, and then on the other buildings, you just see it across the door.
Oh,
So for instance, like 504 has it across windows and doors, but 506 only has it across one of the doors and not the windows.
I think there was one other thing that I wanted to mention. Okay. Okay, that's it for now. I'll pick it up tomorrow.
Item number 7, calendar number 140-14-A, 1016 East 13th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, so there was a March 3rd letter with a revised appraisal report, which shows they would suffer a loss if they had to comply with the new zoning, would suffer a loss of 2,700 square feet in residential, community facility floor area, or 3,600 square feet in residential. But I'm still not understanding, in terms of the appraisal, whether that community facility space was analyzed as basically use group 4 ambulatory care or as commercial. It still says commercial, and I think there is a difference between how much a doctor's office rents for and how much a retail space and rents for. But in any event, because to not really split hairs on this, the condo sales for the commercial space accounts for $600,000 of the total 3.8 income, and even a $3.8 million income, and even a $3 million income exceeds the value of the 3 other scenarios under the present zoning by at least 2 times. So though this should be corrected for the record, really, it doesn't change the calculus. I think there was a mistake on the photo. There was supposed to be a recent photo to show that there's no parking on the site, but it's dated February 2014, so that's not really recent, given that we've passed February 2015. But other than that, I didn't have any other comments. Anybody else?
They still have some discrepancies in their figures that they don't really explain. I know they tried to get all of the figures in line between the checks and the statement. And right now, the statement is pretty okay, give or take $50 to $100 every time they mention it. However, the total checks in total still comes out to $346,000, yet they then kind of put $352,000, superimpose it over it, and don't really explain where that extra $4,000 or $5,000, it's minimal.
Right.
It's just they didn't finish what I had asked them to do. However, I agree with you that they've definitely met the threshold.
Right, okay. So it'd be great if we could clean this up, but it doesn't affect the final
Right.
outcome. Right. Okay.
Zoning calendar decisions, item number 8, 78-11BZ, and 33 through 37-12A. 78-70 Winchester Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, with this one, the EAS was revised to reflect the project. The plans were submitted to be finalized, and there's going to be an E designation placed on the site for hazardous materials. So I think we're finished with this.
Item number 9, calendar number 176-13BZ, 31 Bond Street, Manhattan.
We're still waiting for DEP sign-off on the hazardous materials, and we need an updated certificate of appropriateness since there were changes made to the body of the building, to the bulk.
Item number 10, calendar number 45-14BZ, 337 99th Street, Brooklyn.
Sorry. As requested, the statement of facts was revised to discuss the legalization of the existing structure and the conditions prior to the zoning map change. The building was enlarged pursuant to permit in 1976 in conformance with the R6 zoning, but no C of O obtained. And in 2005, it was rezoned to an R4. I think they've tied this up. So I don't have any other comments. Anybody else?
Item number 11, calendar number 157-14BZ, 1151 East 29th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, they revised the materials to show open space ratio of 0.79. There was confusion about what was what. And the FAR of 0.76, and to include a land use study, include the land use study findings in the statement of facts. The shed is shown to be demolished upon DOB approval, and the cellar is shown as being lowered on the plans. So I didn't have any other comments. Anybody else? No.
Item number 12, calendar number 203-14BZ, 18 West 8th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, and here they provided a Sanborn map showing this is a pre-1961 zoning lot. So the split lot regulations allow the 14'6" that's at the rear in the R6 to be treated as if it's in a C4-5 district. And the statement of facts were revised to show this is a legalization, and noted that the PCE's egress is through the front and does not interfere or depend on the rear easement. Any other?
That's good.
No.
Continued hearings, item number 13, 15311BZ, 27-11 30th Avenue, Queens.
So the submission included an affidavit from the adjoining residential property owner requesting that this existing structure that's kind of terrible looking, it's this corrugated aluminum leftover sort of hovel thing, be retained as a sound barrier. I'm not sure if they're referring to that terrible looking thing, but it seems like that from the photographs. And my reaction is, obviously, there needs to be a barrier, but it can't look like that. It can't just be so disrespectful of the residential uses adjoining. So the plans also show planting at the front, which we requested, but they don't describe what type and how much, et cetera. That needs to be shown on the drawings. They provided photos of what looks like a two-story unsightly corrugated metal structure adjoining the residential property. That's what we was talking about before, which needs to be replaced. And then we had asked them, because of the character of this neighborhood, to use a better looking fence than just a chain link. And they provided cost estimates of $13,000 for the wrought iron versus $8,600 for the chain link, and asked if they could put in the chain link, but then also added to the statement of facts was the fact that the owner can't afford to do either. So my first reaction is, what are we supposed to do about this, because it's in really bad shape. My second is, maybe there's a way of having wrought iron at the front, which is where it has its public persona, and then having chain link around the back. And the plans also show a proposed canopy, but then there's no discussion about what that is. And so either take that off the plans or tell us what proposal is. And so my basic question is, how does the applicant propose to clean up the site in keeping with the quality of the neighborhood if they don't have the money to do any of these things? At the prior hearing, the client actually agreed to meet the board's requests. So we seem to be going back and forth, and I'm not sure why or what to do about it. Anybody else?
I agree about the affidavit. The affidavit was sort of very particular, if that's a word, concerning the corrugated wall. His affidavit just simply said that he would prefer to have a barrier. Well, who knows what the question was that, he gave that answer to. You want us to take down the wall? He might as well could have said, no, I'd just like to have a barrier. So if we can indeed impose upon the owner to create something that's aesthetically more pleasing, considering it's directly up against this owner's property and at their terrace, so they'll see it all the time, I think they should come back to us with some nicer solution than just sort of a metal corrugated wall. And I also was asking, there seems to also be a piece that still goes across at the top, and I think we had said, please remove the roofing, total roof structure up there, but it doesn't appear that that's happened. It appears that the structure may still be up there.
Hence the proposed canopy?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about that because when this site first came to us, it really looked shabby, and part of the reason was that shed-like structure. So if the framework is still in place and now they want to propose a canopy, I think it's going to go back to looking the same way it looked
Right.
before it came to us. So I'd like to know, why is it necessary for them to enclose that part?
Right. And if it's necessary to enclose that part, then how can it be enclosed in a way that really
Okay.
meets the quality of the neighborhood?
Absolutely.
Okay. And, just as a reminder to the owner, this variance expired in 1985. It's been illegally functioning all this time. So if they really want some kind of resolution from us, they have to be willing to spend a little money to improve the site. Any other comments? Okay.
Item number 14, calendar number 174-13BZ, 2449 Morris Avenue, Bronx.
So this is a legalization of an existing PCE that's been operating for 15 years without meeting all kinds of fire safety requirements. We asked them to respond to fire alarms and so on, and they, in January, the fire department provided to them a list of deliverables to have the alarm system reviewed, and in December, they filed an alteration type 2 for fire alarm smoke detector installation, but they haven't gotten anywhere since. So we're going to take this off the calendar until they respond to these very important questions.
Item number 15, calendar number 188-13BZ and 189-13A, 20 Dia Court, Staten Island.
We're taking this off the calendar at the applicant's request.
Item number 16, calendar number 222-13BZ, 2472 Coney Island Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, with respect to this, they clarified the parking requirements for use group 6 retail. It needs 5 spaces for 1,500 square feet, all provided in the C81 portion, and it's attended parking with a curb cut on Coney Island Avenue and exiting to East 9th Street in the C8 district. For the use group 8 auto rental for 9 cars, no parking is required, according to the statement. 3,200 square feet, no car sales are proposed, so it's a different parking category. Rental cars are stored at the building interior, and the entrance and exit is on Coney Island Avenue. And then the use group for ambulatory care, which is 10,000 square feet, needs 36 spaces where only 18 are proposed, all in the R district. Then you enter on Coney Island Avenue, it's attended parking, and you exit on East 9th Street. They state that stackers are not a practical solution to meeting the parking demand because it takes time to raise and lower the stackers to get people out. Not really, they're pretty fast when they're done right. That it requires extra skills to learn how to do that. I think it's just actually some buttons you learn to push. And the aesthetics, that's the only one that I responded to in any way for the neighbors, and of course, it's an increase in cost. So I'm not 100% persuaded about the inability to do stackers. They did show plantings along the property line on the plan, but the drawing shows that the exit from the use group 4 parking is blocked by a parking space, so it's not really 18 spaces, or it's depending on a share with all of the other activities of parking and so on. So they need to discuss that. There's no explanation for what the enclosure is for those 6 cars that are for the use group 6, no, 5 cars for the use group 6. And then, interestingly, the revised parking study actually has a parking demand for the rental parking. And I actually don't understand that based on a Manhattan rental location. I don't even understand that in Manhattan. It's how do people drive to rent a car? Or they're driving because they drive there because they're having their car inspected? I mean, I don't.
Occasionally you do. I mean,
Yes.
and it also depends, I think, on the operation. Like Enterprise, for instance, will come and pick you up. So a lot of times they'll have a car that they come and actually get you to take you back to the place. So you might need a couple of spaces just for employees and for the operation of the business. I had that question too, was, exactly what they intended. If they needed parking, what was the operation of that particular car rental place. But I also was confused by what looks like a 2-story enclosure for those 5 cars. Right. And I was thinking, well, if you want to talk aesthetics and stackers, and you're thinking you'd like to have a 2-story enclosed space, why don't you put the stackers in there and double the amount
Get 12
of cars and get 12 cars in there. So it was a little confusing to me, but those were my 2 biggest issues.
Yeah, I also had a question about the rental car demand, because I was wondering if that demand was somehow based on the amount of cars that they're actually offering at that site. Because if they're only going to accommodate 9 cars of that demand, and that demand really is double, then they really do have to consider the use of either stackers, and they can maybe line the stackers up near the rear of the building so that they're less visible by the street. And if not stackers, then maybe we need to limit the amount of cars that are offered for rent at that site so it doesn't exceed the demand.
It's always 9, right?
And I just had the question that their peak parking demand is 32 spaces. And I just wanted to confirm that that's the 23 outdoor spaces and the 9 interior spaces meet that demand.
Right, well, actually, no, because according to the analysis with the rental, there's 19 spaces needed for the rental.
Right, but they're saying that at 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon, when you have the peak parking demand, the community facility demand is much
It's
lower.
low, so then, but at the same time, it says those 10 spaces will go wandering around on the streets, and then they did a study and they found there were plenty of spaces on the street, but not really, like 1 space. Yeah, they need to, I found that the parking study is just as confusing as it was before. Because the way that it's handled is everything is done in a percentage without being resolved in a number, how many cars. And so you look at all these percentages, and it's like a percentage of what? Now, I have to do the math. I mean, I'm not really sure what that all is. It should be really easy to understand the number of cars per peak hour, per use, and how many or how they're generated, and it just isn't. So we really need the consultant here to walk us through, because it's not okay to have these kinds of traffic studies where they just sort of don't make sense, and you have to You just have to sort of take their word for it. Okay. So still a lot of questions on this really threshold issue. Is it okay to reduce the number of parking spaces?
Item number 17, calendar number 248-13BZ, 1179 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
This one, I know the plans were revised, but the line weight and all of that is so tentative that it's really difficult to see what was actually done. The plan looks the same as the prior submission, but one of the side elevations either looks like it sort of fades off into the Netherlands, or the attic was pulled back from the front, or maybe the rear, because it's just not clear, because I can't verify in plan which was pulled back. If the architect were brought in, we could discuss this and like finish this off, right? I just find these kinds of constant submissions slows down the way that we review this without having the architect present. Anybody else?
Just that they should show that they comply with the front yard landscaping.
Okay.
Item number 18, calendar number 41-14BZ, 21-37 Waverly Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. So I found the applicant was extremely responsive in this submission and supplied really good submissions that addressed most of our questions. That's really a pleasure when they're responsive and address most of the questions. They have DOT has conducted a school safety review, and they suggest that a safe route plan be developed by the school. So the school should, since the school exists, it should get on that right away. They still need DEP air quality and noise sign off. The school did an indoor air photo ionization test, which showed 0 results on everything, but DEP has to review whether it was properly conducted. And noise tests show attenuation is needed on Washington Avenue, but not really on Waverly. I would say as long as you're doing it, you should really do both sides, but it's true it's not implicated. The applicant submitted plans showing changes to egress routes and egress from classrooms and access to the stairs. Still didn't show me where that elevator is. I see an elevator, but it looks to me that it's more like a cargo lift. Plus, the way the students get in is they go right into those staircases directly from the street, so that elevator looks like it's associated with the kitchen or something else like that, or even with that bus repair. And so, where's the elevator? It's absolutely illegal not to have an elevator that takes you to the school, to all levels of the school. They did provide certificates of inspection of the Ansel system in the commercial kitchen, and they also provided a fire department inspection report on 5 auto dry valves and 3 fire department connections, but we have no way of knowing what this is for, what this is connected to, nothing. There is happily an on-site fire department approved safety warden. The applicant also showed that before there were 25 DOB and ECB violations, which have now been reduced to 6 ECB and 3 DOB. Most of the violations have to do with work without permits, and one is about an abandoned elevator. I think that's the one in sort of the lower left-hand corner on Waverly. And maybe that elevator shouldn't be abandoned. It's an elevator that looks like it has direct access to the street. That could solve the problems. The response letter discusses sprinklers and notes that a change in use will require the existing system's compliance with 2014 sprinkler regs. That's also true for the alarm system. The sprinkler and alarm drawings should be prepared and filed now. I note that the photo of the fire stairs, and there's many fire stairs with a whole series of photographs, show that there are sometimes push bars. There are some fire alarm pull stations, or here and there. There are some battery-packed exit signs and some fire extinguishers, but no way to tell whether this sort of smattering of those things complies. The letter states, and I'd actually like Commissioner Hinkson to comment on this, the letter states that the building would follow 68 code as it applies to egress. And I, having checked, what triggers needing to comply with 2014 code, this is a change in use to a school, so I'm just curious whether, you can apply this egress, existing 68 egress. I see they inserted a new stair without filing for permits, so therefore, we don't know whether that was a compliant stair. That's kind of ridiculous. The letter also states that there is no fire separation between the garage level at grade and the school above. There's a 3-hour fire separation required. That's pretty scary. The kitchen does have a 2-hour fire separation, but elsewhere at grade level, there is no separation. I don't know what the uses are there. And the stair that was enclosed without permits was installed without a fire enclosure. The letter notes that the architect conducted a site visit recently to verify the uses against the drawings and noted changes to the building layouts, and plumbing has been done since the last visit. It seems this client doesn't really believe in submitting for a DOB approval or getting permits, even during the pendency of an application before the BSA. This is really unacceptable, especially for a school where there are extraordinary safety concerns. We need to change this behavior. I'd like the architect, therefore, to go through the entire safety system, fire stop, egress review, sprinklers, everything, and provide plans for the work needed to bring the building up to code. And I would like the buildings department to review those plans. All this work, it may be that we need all this work done because we can't really rely on the property owner to honor our conditional approvals, that all this work may need to be done prior to the determination. They also provided a traffic study based on car counts. So the traffic study was actually surprisingly good because it was done by a newcomer to the traffic study department. It was based on actual car counts on several days at intersections and on this portion of Waverly and Washington that shows the buses are handled in an orderly, efficient fashion, and that there is little traffic on these blocks during pickup and drop-off times. The area in front of the school on Waverly already has no parking from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., but since that doesn't cover the pickup drop-off times, that probably they should request from DOT that those hours be extended, and also request the same on Washington. And then also at our request, we asked that they improve the facade of the building, so there are drawings that show decorative elements that will improve the look of the school. I hope it actually is implemented in that way. Any other comments?
I had a question about which code they were going to be able to comply with as well. My big question was, there's a change of use, but there's also significant interior changes that are being made. So I think they may trigger having to sort of step up their code compliance and move into 2014. That also being said, the fact that they have fire safety officers triggered in my mind that they probably have deficiencies in their fire safety coverage, which is why they have to have these officers. It was my experience at DOB that when a facility was up and running and could be managed in terms of safety while they were doing work or whatever, that we would insist that they have a certain amount of fire safety officers that could be on hand in case there was an emergency to get people out of the building. And it's not clear to me whether or not their sprinkler and alarm system is adequate and whether or not it's been kept up to code. All we see are sort of snippets of what they have, but it's not telling me the entire plan, which would then allow me to do that analysis. So that that was sort of paramount on my comments. Secondly, I was very happy to see the traffic study and the fact they were using real numbers as opposed to sort of taken out of a manual somewhere. And my only question would be that they have significant space allotted for the buses at the curb at the times that they need those buses to be there, because otherwise, even if they're a little out from the curb, you stop, I guess it's north and south. They would stop both north and south traffic because the stop sign comes out of the bus and everybody's kind of got to stop. So although south there were only, I guess at peak there were like 7 cars, you also have to count in north where there were like 9 cars waiting. So you do that continually over the course of the half an hour, 45 minutes that it takes to offload all of these kids. You can start getting some, it may not be significant cars, but you're getting some backup. So if there can be a distinct place by the curb that the bus, like 3 buses, could pull up and offload, I think that would allow other cars to pass by while they're offloading.
Is that actually allowed when a bus pulls on the curb and it turns, doesn't it flip open its little stop sign?
It's supposed to, but I don't know if there is, maybe there's an exception that if you are at the curb at a particular bus stopping place. But clearly when you're away from the curb, or, like a car is at the curb and you now double park, and they pull out that stop sign, both directions have to stop.
My experience with the buses by my house, because I'm right across the street from the school, is even when they pull to the curb, they do pull out the stop sign and everybody stops regardless of whether they're in the street, double parked, or right on the curb until the loading and unloading takes place.
But once they close the doors, then the little thing flips
Right.
closed, right? So if they've closed it, then people can pass.
Right.
Even though the bus still hasn't pulled out of the parking spot.
I was happy to see that the surrounding uses didn't include, as the applicant said, any auto body or heavy manufacturing. But their phase 1 did list a couple of, one actually, environmental condition regarding some underground gasoline tanks in the building in the northwest corner. I just wanted to know if they've done like a geophysical survey to locate them, and are they going to remove them?
When they talk about their noise monitoring study, it appears to me that they've done an outdoor study and that they're kind of assuming that the additional glazing in conjunction with the 18-foot wide sidewalk is going to then lower the noise inside to the appropriate amount. And if the school is operating, why didn't they just do the noise monitoring indoors? And then they would know definitely what is the noise before any modifications are done and what will the noise be after the modification.
Item number 19, calendar number 56-14BZ, 161-51, Bailey Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, they submitted plans showing fencing around the entire perimeter of the site as opposed to partially as it was before, and cameras focused on the vacant lot and lighting, which will be directed down to the neighbors. The photos show the fence in good repair, and the planting already, well, I think it was in earlier photos too, but on the interior of one portion of the fence, but not on the exterior that's shown on the drawings. You can't plant in a little while, in maybe a month, you'll be able to actually plant. They also show the clothing bins removed. And they did provide documentation of continuous use since the expiration date of the variance in 2004. So any other comments?
No, I thought it was pretty complete.
Okay, good. So, I think that they've been very responsive, but because the site is so troubled, and the prior owners were really bad neighbors, I do think this should be a short-term grant so that we can revisit how things are going in a short amount of time. Okay.
Item number 20, calendar number 122-14BZ, 1318 East 28th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, so the plan was revised to move the attic back, but it's not dimensions, so we don't know by how much. Seems as if it's now centered on the house.
I measured 27 feet 6 inches from the front street wall.
Okay, so you just measured off the plans?
No, I actually found some dimensions on some of the elevations to
Just
figure that out.
added it up, okay, so moving it back obviously make a big difference. Which is one of the things that we needed them to do. The applicant still hasn't responded, though, to comments about the rear yard, which they're reducing to 20 feet, and which is shown by the photographs as being really cramped. And I'm just wondering whether, because the attic is shown as continuing sort of below this big dormer, so that there's this kind of dormer attic, and then there's the main attic. And I'm just wondering whether the attic at the rear could be reduced to maybe even be like a porch or something like that, so that you don't get this sort of effectively this 3-story thing towering over the rear. That way, I understand there's a master bedroom and there's a kitchen, a dining area, so you don't want to eliminate a bedroom like that. But to drop the roof so it just doesn't tower, since they're not getting any usable space out of that portion.
It's inaccessible. I think
Yeah,
that's it. So I
right.
was thinking, why
Yeah.
accessible? Why is it there?
Why is it there? And a porch would be more useful, maybe with some steps up the back, you could actually access it, or you could access it directly from that dormered attic place, then that would be kind of nice, actually. So, again, it'd be really handy if we had the architect here as opposed to the lawyer conveying information about architecture to the architect.
The architect
Oh, this
is the
is
applicant.
Yeah, okay, I was
So he's
confused
here.
about which one's the architect and which one, okay. How come this is taking so long if it's an architect that we're talking to? Architect should ask that question of architect self. Okay.
Why am I here again?
New cases, item number 1, calendar number 46-14BZ, 252 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is a almost 15,000 square foot PCE in the cellar level of a 2-story commercial building. They did provide construction drawings for some reason, like all of them, but no information about the acoustical treatment of the walls, ceilings, or floor to separate from the adjoining commercial uses, so we need that. We do have fire department and Department of Investigation sign off, and I note that the parking category that requires 15 spaces, but those are waived because it's less than the minimum. And I just note that this is a site that's had a lot of sort of DEP and DEC action, where there was a remedial action plan for a former Exxon gas station, and there was originally a proposal to have parking in this cellar, and now that it's to be occupied by a use, the remedial action plan had to be revised, and I understand that both DEC and Exxon have agreed on the modifications. So it obviously needs to have been constructed pursuant to that.
I read through a lot of the environmental consultants' reports, and in one of them, they sort of asked for BSA guidance regarding whether or not, I think the restrictive deck can be lifted. Because under the prior variance, there was a restrictive declaration that they had to do certain work. And I guess they still have that restrictive declaration, but they have completely different plans at this point. So I think it was in one of the Kleinfelder reports, they want to vacate the original wrap. And they had some strange comments about whether the owner was still under an obligation to install, maintain, and operate the sub-slab depressurization system, and
Wow.
and there's also the site is under active remediation, under the DEC, they have this sparging system and all that going on still. And that equipment's going to be in the cellar.
Right. So
So
what's,
that's what, I just didn't understand what they were really asking from us. If we had to do something regarding the restrictive deck.
well, it's curious because they didn't ever build the building pursuant to the variance. So this is an as-of-right building, and as far as I know, they didn't abandon the variance. So the first part of it would be that they'd have to abandon the variance, right? But the second part of it is the restrictive deck is obviously for remedial action that needs to be performed. I don't understand how DEC would agree to that. Usually the deck is there because DEC is allowing you to perform the work after the grant, right? Otherwise, they'd say, do the remedial work now. So,
Well, maybe they can clarify that.
yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Item number 2, 143-14BZ, 746 61st Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is a 10,000 square foot PCE in the cellar and first floor of, and really also the second floor offices on an existing two-story cellar commercial building, so they're occupying the whole building. Because it's a spa with jacuzzis and saunas, it's not a noisy use like a gym, so I don't think there are acoustical issues, in addition to which it's occupying the entire building. The statement of fact says it only performs foot massages. However, I've been in these places and they do a lot more than foot massages. So we will need massage licenses for this. I also don't understand how the parking requirements are being satisfied. This is a parking category B with one space per 300 square feet, which is 33 spaces. The maximum amount you can waive is 15. So what's up with that? We do have Department of Investigation sign off, and the fire department requested that their standard notes be added to the plans. So we need to see that complied with.
I was curious about what are the hours of operation, because I just kind of felt that the way they made this sound, it's almost like, can you spend the entire night in this relaxation chair?
I was
Watching
intrigued by
TV and surfing the internet, it's a very unusual PCE.
Yes.
I was
And-
intrigued by the record, sort of those, I guess, recliners that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they
And is
call them
this
transcendental meditation.
for both men and women? Is it
I
just,
think it was just men, didn't it
I don't
say
know, they didn't say they
businessmen?
have 2 locker rooms.
Oh,
So I
they
didn't
do?
know if it was for men and women.
Oh, so they wear something in those jacuzzis and those.
I don't know.
Well, I've actually been in some of those ones where you wear a little outfit in the saunas, because that's dry, right? But what do you do about a wet sauna? Maybe what kind of outfit?
And then if they could give us a rear elevation, because there's windows in the cellar. I just couldn't understand how that, and that some of them were actually in, I think, these scrub rooms.
Scrub rooms.
What's this?
Oh, that's where you you scrub up before you go into the.
Oh, where you
sauna.
slough off all.
No, it's actually, no, it's, so I'm assuming this is Korean. So where, like Japanese, you have to be super, super clean before you go into any of these things. So you spend a very long time scrubbing your body before they let you into any of these other rooms.
Ah.
So before you can submerge into a jacuzzi that you're sharing with other people, et cetera, which is a really good idea. But yeah. Okay. Let's just say we need more information about how this place really operates. It almost harkens back to the days of why physical cultural establishments were regulated. Okay.
Item number 3, 241-14BZ, 517 East 117th Street, Manhattan.
So the applicant should state that this is a legalization, and it doesn't, it's almost 15,000 square feet on the 3rd floor of a 6-story shopping center that has plenty of on-site parking. We have DOI and fire department sign-off. The since the gym is operating, we need to have proof of compliance with the fire alarm and sprinkler requirements, and also to provide details on the acoustical separation from the adjoining tenants. Yield? Okay.
This concludes the March 9th, 2015 executive session.
Yeah. Thank you.
It took me a while to figure out how to get